Here's what we're going to need to get started. The best things, this is the stamp set for my acrylic stamp. We're also going to need the Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge, exclusively by Close to My Heart. We're going to be using the Shapes 3 on page 46, right here. For our cardstock, we're going to use Smoothie, and this is cut at 5.5 by 8.5. Then I've scored it at 4 1/4. We'll fold that, crease it with our bone folder to get a nice, good, clean fold. Now for our layering, we're going to use Smoothie, and the first piece will be at 4 5/8 by 3 3/8, and the second piece will be 3 3/8 by 2. Then we're going to, our mats are going to be in Colonial White, and there's 3 pieces. We've got a 5 3/8 by 4 1/8, a 4 1/2 by 3 1/4, and a 3 1/4 by 1 7/8. Now this is the B&T paper coming from the Roxy, and I'm using that to cut out the label. You can see that down below. That's going to be, again, cut out, I believe it, 1 1/4. Again, the Art Philosophy cartridge, page 46, cut at 1 1/4. And this is the stamp we'll be using on that. For our inks, we're going to be using Smoothie, Tulip, Desert Sand, Cocoa, I really love the stamps pads by Close to My Heart. Now these are the bitty opaques in pearl, and I'm trying to show you, but they don't really show up all that well. I'm going to use several throughout the card. Next we'll be using our Tombow Mono adhesive. We're going to use both permanent, which is in the blue, and the yellow is removable. And you'll see in a little bit why. The sponge daubers to do our distressing on the edges of the different papers. We'll also need our My Acrylics blocks in the 2 different sizes. These are crystal clear blocks that are really great, and you're going to see, I'm going to show you a piece where I did make a mistake and I was able to correct that. As you see, I already have my clear acrylic stamps attached to the blocks. Now here's how I set up the papers in order to do the layering. With using the temporary or removable adhesive, I'm going to attach the layered pieces of the Colonial White cardstock together. And it's important, I'm going to look and make sure that all of the borders are nice and even on the first layered piece. On the second layered piece, I'm going to attach that, but just slightly higher than centered, and that's just to kind of create a different type of balance. I don't want it completely centered. So as you can see, we have all 3 of the Colonial White attached. Now we're going to start with our stamping. I'm going to be using the Smoothie stamp pad from Close to My Heart, and as you see, there you go, there's the Smoothie. Isn't that a pretty color? It goes really well with the Roxy paper, the B&T paper that I used for the label, and I'm also using that same paper for the inside, which I'll show you at the end. Now here I'm applying the ink to the acrylic stamp. I'm wiping that off because if I accidentally rock it, I don't want it to smudge. Now you can see I didn't quite apply enough pressure on the left hand side, and when I pick that up, you're going to see an area that did not get stamped properly. Hold on to those papers so they don't lift up. Can you see that? So what I'm going to do is, because these are crystal clear, I can go back and realign that stamp and stamp that image with the ink that was left behind. And just watch how nicely this comes out. It doesn't create a shadow or anything. And this is another reason I've switched over to the Close to My Heart stamps. Look at that, isn't that beautiful? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and start over because I was not happy with the remaining stamping that I did. And so I just flipped everything over and started over again with the same pieces of paper. No sense in tossing those. Now, as you can see, I've applied a lot more pressure. Now again, I didn't quite apply enough pressure on that left hand side, but that's okay because it's just really close to the edge of the paper. And when we use our mats, that'll cover that up. So it'll look really nice. So here I'm just going to continue to stamp the smoothie onto the Colonial White. And then I'm going to switch to the Desert Sand. And with the Desert Sand, I'm actually going to use a stamp-off technique using second generation stamping. And that's just so that the ink goes on in a much lighter shade. And it's just to add a little bit of shadowed stamping there. I really like the way this came out. You can't really appreciate it on the screen, but trust me, in person it really looks fabulous. So I've just sped the video up a little bit so we don't have to watch me do each of the stamping. And as you can see, it's really coming out nicely. You can even see the seams of the paper. So here we are. We're going to go ahead and start with the label. And again, using that temporary adhesive, I'm going to attach it to the mat so that it doesn't move when I go to stamp it. Here I'm using the cocoa. And because I haven't seasoned the stamp, I'm going to test it. It looks good, so I can go ahead and do my actual stamping. And I kind of do the tap, tap, twist, twist, tap, tap. Make sure that's inked up nice, line it up. And there we go. I absolutely love using the different labels and shapes that you can cut out with the Art Philosophy cartridge that go, or coordinate, excuse me, really well with some of our stamp sets. And this is one of them. Now I'm going to go ahead and with the cocoa again distress the edges using my sponge dauber. Once I've done that, I'm going to take the tulip and just, sorry about that. Once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and use the Desert Sand and distress the Colonial White pieces. Now I'm going to pull them apart and go ahead and distress all of those, just with a little bit of Desert Sand around all of the edges. I really like the way this turns out. And now on the smoothie, I'm going to be using the tulip and do the same technique of distressing and sponging the edges. Now that we have everything sponged, we're going to go ahead and assemble our card. I missed a little piece there, as you can see. Got that real quick. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and mat each of the pieces that were stamped. And I'm leaving about an 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16 of an inch border around each of them. I'm going to line them up. There we go. Now, as you can see, this I turned over the pieces, and that's the stamping that was on the other side. No sense in wasting any paper. Go ahead and mount that one, and then mount this last piece to the actual card base. Taking a lot of care to make sure that everything's lined up and all of the edges have the same border size around each of them. And they do. Now comes the tricky part. Now I've got to make sure that I've got all the stamped images lined up. So you can see I'm checking all 4 corners. And I'll see if I didn't, that's what it would have looked like. So there we go. And now I'm kind of figuring out, do I want to use 3D dimensional tape, or do I want to adhere them directly to it? I've decided to go ahead and layer the label that I cut out with the Art Philosophy cartridge and pop that up on 3D dimensional tape. Place that on the center. Then I'm going to adhere that with Tombow mono adhesive. Lining up, now it's, right here is real important that we line up all of the stamped image so that it looks like one continuous stamp. That's the trick to this whole layered card. And I'm going to go ahead and pop these up on three-dimensional tape as well. I like with the tape that we have, we can cut it to size, small, large, whatever we need. I press down really hard, make sure they're coming off. I think I had too much coffee today. I'm shaking quite a bit. There we go, checking it out again, lining up all of the stamped images, and there you have it. I'm going to go ahead and add some of those video pakes to the tag, and then I'm also going to do it throughout the card, but I'm not going to have you watch that whole process. I want to keep the time down on this card. There we go, and again, here's that beautiful paper that I cut the label out of, and I'm also going to use it on the inside of the card. I really wish you could see this in person. It's absolutely stunning. So next we're going to go to the inside and how I did that. And again, I've taken a piece of the B&T paper and cut that to, I believe it was 5 1/4 by 4, and then the Colonial White was 5 by 3 3/4, sponging the edges, using the tulip again. Now we're going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and stamp the same image, but this time I'm going to do it on in the desert sand, and again using the second generation stamping. And when you do that, as you can see, I'm getting some of the ink on the stamp mat. So I'm going to make sure to wipe that off before I do anything else so that I don't get it smudged onto the card base once I've attached this piece to the mat. The mat, that B&T paper is absolutely gorgeous. Again, it comes from the Roxy collection. And now we'll just line that up, again making sure that everything's nice and even. Got a little bit of extra adhesive there and just took that off. There we go. All done. I hope you like the card, and here's another example. This one I used stamping as well. I've got two other, oh there we go, I did the inside there. And I've got two other samples. The next one is using B&T paper, and if anybody would like, let me know and I'll do a video on how I do that. It is slightly different from the stamping because it involves different types of cuts. You can see I did the inside of that. And then my last sample is also with some pattern paper. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Make comments, subscribe. I've also provided at the end my email if you'd like to email me directly. Thanks again. Have a great day.